Greg Ferbrache. I have a solo practice, Ferbrache Law. Frankly, it's an honor to be with these panelists who have dedicated themselves to Proposition 2 and medical cannabis. I'm here because I bring a unique perspective. I've worked with the government as a prosecutor for 12 years previously, 8 years with the District Attorney's Office, 4 years with the Attorney General's Office, and within that as a special assistant to the U.S. Attorney's Office. So I've worked with the executive, legislative, and judicial branches in a lot of legislation areas, as well as criminal laws particularly. In the past year and a half, as I've grown my practice, I've been able and have had the opportunity to work with some really good clients, really good people who have used cannabis for medical purposes. And in so doing have come into the criminal justice system or have been brought into the criminal justice system. And I've seen firsthand the impact that it has on them and the difficulties with that. Whether it's losing their driver's license, whether it's being required to do a substance abuse evaluation and treatment and undergoing treatment, when in fact the purpose of using the cannabis was to improve their health. And so the treatment the purpose of the treatment is to overcome an addiction. In these cases where medical cannabis is being used for well-being, it really misses the point. It's been quite enlightening, and so I am new to this side, and I appreciate the opportunity to bring that perspective to Prop 2 and understanding of the proposed legislation. I'm sure I'm not as much of an expert as my panelists here are, but I hope to be able to assist in answering questions how we go forward with medical cannabis.
I'm going to admit something to you, which is that I was a medical cannabis skeptic. But, it's just a way of moving the reform process along. So I'm in favor of that because I want to see the laws reformed. But now I'm a patient. I have been for several years now. Yeah, somehow, after a couple of incarnations, Truce was born in 2016. Okay, so drug policy, I'm the principal blogger. I'm the senior blog editor for TRUCE Utah. I have been doing that for about 830 days since I got out of cardiac rehab after a quadruple bypass. I woke up in the ICU and I said, I'm still alive for a reason. Something to justify all that money that society just spent on keeping me alive. All right, 2016 we worked on SB 73 with Senator Madsen, and we got it through the Utah Senate. And that was after a series of 4 or 5 amendments. I think it was revision 5 was the one that we got past the Senate. And then a character you're going to hear more about later, Speaker Hughes, sent it to a committee in the House where it didn't even get a hearing, let alone get to the floor. And we knew from our speaking to the people that we had spoken to, we had at least a chance of passing the House. Now, Speaker Hughes is the person brokering this new Proposition 2 is the compromise. That's the one that was tested in the Utah State Senate. That's the one where we tried to negotiate between what the people of Utah were ready for and what we know about medical cannabis science. This is something which did not involve the patients. The people who have made this movement happen over the last 4 years we were not in that room, and what came out is not a compromise. It's some other alternative altogether, and I'm going to stop right there.
My name's Christine Stenquist, and I'm a medical cannabis advocate. In 1996, when I was 24 years old, I woke up in the emergency room. They went through a series of tests, and they discovered that I had a brain tumor. It was pressing on my brain stem, and it was causing a lot of complications. I was told to get my affairs in order. Like I said, I was 24 at the time. I had 2 children, a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and I was just recently divorced. I went into surgery, and they removed 40% of the tumor, and they hit a blood vessel, and I started to hemorrhage. I stroked and slipped into a coma. I was there for 4 days. I awoke with a tremendous amount of pain, still in my face. I'm deaf in my left ear, so my left side had severe weakness. I was unable to walk. And I spent the next 9 days in ICU. And I kept coding. I spent the next 16 years bedridden and housebound on heavy pharmaceutical drugs, battling the leftover results of the tumor, but the complicated migraines I had suffered before the even discovery of the tumor. And now I suffer from a condition called trigeminal neuralgia, which is a severe nerve pain. Half of my face on all 3 branches feels like they're on fire. all the time, a severe ice cream headache that never goes away. I get sharp, shooting pain shoots across my face just because I'm talking, or I brush my hair. 16 years, I raised my babies from a couch, from a dark, quiet room, tried to etch out some sort of life. I missed dance recitals, I missed birthdays, I missed family reunions, I missed seasons. I don't know how to explain that to you unless you're a patient in the audience that understands that. But to go down in spring and wake up and know the leaves have changed colors and you don't know where your summer went, year after year, until your 20s are gone, your 30s are gone. I had been on so much pharmaceutical medicine and have gone through so much detox. My body was frail. But I hit a pain wall, another one, yet again. I was on a fentanyl patch. I was getting Dilaudid for breakthrough pain. And I was popping Percocets like Tic Tacs. My doctor said, "You're hitting a ceiling, Christine. This stuff is going to kill you." So in 2012, this pain wall hit and I wasn't eating. I wasn't walking. My health was deteriorating. Over the next 2 months, I was wasting away. I decided I'd had enough. I went to my doctor and I said, "I want to try medical cannabis." He said, "Don't try anything illegal. This pain clinic recommends Marinol. It will help. It will get your nausea under control. We can get you back on your meds." Marinol, it's synthesized THC. It's a pharmaceutical drug. Started that therapy. For about 2 weeks, I got a little bit of relief. Just a little bit. I was able to get applesauce in me, but I had to discontinue because of the side effects. Yet another failed therapy. Nerve ablations hadn't worked at this point. Trigger point injections hadn't worked at this point. We're talking about putting implants in me, wires coming out of me. Maybe that will work. And I procured my first bag and used cannabis, and within moments of using it, I got relief from my nausea. Over the course of 2 weeks, I started using cannabis daily and documenting what was going on with me. So I'm microdosing cannabis, and over the course of 2 weeks, I start walking. I'm using my cane. I'm getting around my house. 6 months later, I'm driving. I'm driving again. And my pain is subsiding, and I'm skipping medication, and I'm dropping them off. I'm not even taking my pain meds like I used to. I'm only using cannabis. I start getting educated about cannabis oil. I introduce that into my diet on top of vaporizing cannabis dried flower. Something's out to change in my state because my life is changing. I'm functioning. I'm out in the world. 8 months later, I found my way to Capitol Hill, and I started to hear the talk of the CBD oil, the epilepsy moms that were trying to access this medication for their babies were putting out false information about THC, the very thing that was giving me my life back. I needed to help educate my community. And this is back in 2014, so many of you may remember the whole CBD frenzy that started happening. It started here in Utah. We had the first CBD-only bill in the entire country, and it fractured the movement and the knowledge that we all had at one point. Now here we are, 4 years later. We're trying to correct a wrong, not just with prohibition, but what we've tried to do in this movement by demonizing part of a plant. TRUCE stands for so many things, but it stands for Together for Responsible Use in Cannabis Education. That is what our society has been missing for 80 years. We've been blinded by false propaganda by our government, by special interests, keeping this plant away from us. I discovered along the way the politics that happens around this plant. And that's why we created this movement. We knew we had to change things, and we knew there were so many others out there that wanted to see this change. So I felt like I had to create a platform Not just for me to get up and say, hey, I use cannabis in Utah and I use it illegally and it gave me back my life and I'm not an evil person. I'm not. I'm just a mom in Kaysville who enjoys the seasons now. And I want that for every patient in Utah and across the country. And I'm tired of the lies. And I want transparency on this issue. And if we can make that happen in Utah, we can make that happen across the country and then globally, because this is wrong. This plant should not be kept from patients. It should not be kept from scientists. It should not be in the hands of pharmaceutical companies only. I think that's wrong. Let's not keep it trapped in the labs. So that's where I'm at. This is where truce is. This is where we are. So over the course of 4 years, we've been trying here in Utah to raise awareness about cannabis, but also trying to shake off the apathy we all suffer from when it comes to politics. I am trying to give you all the ability to reach out and create change in Utah. We have had patient advocates come up on the Hill for the past 4 years, advocating their legislators, sharing their stories, emailing, calling, trying to get them to understand that we need access here. Well, guess what, guys? We got their attention. For the first time this year, through extraordinary measures of putting a ballot initiative in a place of people to vote on, they finally admit, okay, we get it. We accept that there is medical cannabis and it should be awarded to patients. So for that, can we just applaud? And we all did that because we shared our stories. We started that conversation at the kitchen table. You started to hear those stories. What about Doug Rice? Did anybody hear about Doug Rice and Ashley? You hear the stories and you start to wonder and you start to research. And that's where change happens. And that's what we're seeing. But what we're also seeing is the politics involved and the clampdown and the trying to be restrictive and trying to strip you of your voice and your vote. We saw that happen through Prop 2. 4 days before the ballots go out to the community, we see our legislative body, the powers that be in the state, the financial powers, the morality police, have a press conference and tell you, we got it taken care of. We've ignored you. We've lied to you. We've been deceitful for 4 years. But right now, 4 days before the ballot, we've got a compromise. Don't worry about it. But please, vote for Prop 2. Vote for Prop 2. But when you're done, we're going to hold a special session and we're going to gut it. If I were you, I'd be outraged. I would absolutely be outraged. This is how our government functions. This is how Utah is functioning. They're telling you your vote doesn't count, and I'm telling you it does. And I'm telling you you have power, and it's at your fingertips. You can call your governor. You can tell him no to special session. You can say, honor my vote. I've gotten my life back. We have moved a mountain, a spoonful at a time, but we have moved a mountain in Utah.
Awesome. My name's Justin. I own an engineering company here in Utah. I also own an engineering company that services the cannabis industry. I've also been involved in caregiving quite a bit. Being able to help somebody make a choice that is difficult to make. Being able to care about somebody enough to break the law, to take a risk. Either you are prosecuted, or even worse, the patient that you're trying to help falls on the wrong side of that prosecution. Watching somebody die is a hard thing to do, and I've done it a number of times. The first time you do that, it changes your life, and it makes it very easy to make those choices. And it's a powerful thing to see people's lives actually changed. And when you see that, it becomes very clear that it's very important for us to advocate, all of us.
So in Prop 2 specifically, it mentions that it requires you to have an existing relationship with a doctor and a diagnosis that fits a conditions list that's in the ballot initiative. There is some oversight there, even though the opposition will tell you that Proposition 2, it's going to be recreational from day one. That's blatantly false. This is a restrictive medical program. In fact, we had the initiative graded by the national group that we work with, ASA, and it received a poor mark because it was so restrictive. We're very confident that the compromise language is going to do much worse.
Yeah, one of the things in the, I'm going to call it the compromise, there are a number of professions that have Schedule II prescribing licenses. Podiatrists, nurse practitioners, physician assistants, optometrists, I think there's a couple of others, and they are going to be wiped out of being able to serve patients. And when you get out to rural Utah, there are lots of places where physician's assistants and nurse practitioners are the only practitioners within 100 miles of a lot of people. And for veterans, they're going to have to go to a non-VA psychiatrist in Utah, and these are people who often don't have a lot of money to spend, and they're going to have to get an entirely new workup, not from any doctor, but from a psychiatrist, whereas for any other PTSD diagnosis, for any other form of treatment, any doctor can prescribe for PTSD, but not for cannabis.
Right, and that is significant for vets. I'm actually a vet. Many of these vets, you know, they don't have outside insurance, so the only way that they get medical care is through the VA. And oftentimes, the wait times to see specialized care in the VA system is very lengthy, 3 to 6 months, sometimes more. What we have now, we have 22 suicides a day in the vet community. And if somebody's waiting for 6 months, and I've taken calls like this, where this gentleman's calling the crisis line 5 times a day. He has young kids in the house, and he's a mess. If that individual had to wait 6 months, he wouldn't be here. And so it's especially important to call attention to those things around PTSD, specifically for veterans.
From a legal perspective, and then of course from the rest of the panel, if we can get some perspectives. From a legal standpoint, is the implementation of Prop 2 or the compromise possible as written?
Greg, you want to start that?
So
you can give your opinion on that. I have probably
so the question is it possible? Well, I think with your vote, absolutely possible. I will say that I believe that it's really important, as the panelists have indicated, that Prop 2 needs to pass in order to force further discussion. If Prop 2 doesn't pass, I think there's the concern that they won't be interested or forced into addressing the issues of legalizing medical cannabis. You know, whether or not we want to change or whether or not we want to see the compromise to the compromise, really Prop 2 must pass in order to force that conversation. And hopefully the integrity of Prop 2 is maintained. The legislature can make many changes, as they do with statute all the time. And so I also agree that we need to communicate with each of your legislators and the governor as well, that you do not want to see the changes of Prop 2. You want to see what was passed by referendum. But to the legal aspect, yes, Prop 2 would become effective. And yes, the legislators can make changes as they deem necessary or as they vote, whether by special session or by general session, they can affect statute at any time.
That compromise language, that program will never get off the ground as it's written. There are so many problems and holes in this language. It's lengthy, 126 pages, so I don't blame you if you can't get through it. One of the very first things is that a patient, as this bill's written now, the patient is mandated to go and get a BCI check and an FBI background check before they can get a medical cannabis card. That is a remarkable amount of bureaucracy for somebody who is sick. We prescribe opiates to people who are felons, and they take that prescription and they go fill it. Now we're saying that not only have you spent all of your money through exhausting medical care for things that didn't work, now you want to try cannabis, go get a BCI check, go get an FBI check. Then we're going to issue you a card. That card is only good for a month. You have to go back to your doctor and get another card, do another workup, and then we'll let you have that for 2 months. Once that's done, come back in 6 months, and then every 6 months after that. So just that provision alone is onerous for patients. The pharmacy aspect, Utah's trying to do a centralized pharmacy fill method where you're actually requiring somebody who goes to school for 6 years to dispense medicine then forego that training and their DEA license to work in a dispensary to dispense cannabis. The likelihood of that happening is very, very remote. And then the bureaucracy behind the way that central fill pharmacy is spelled out. There are several other states that have tried to do this. Arkansas is one, Louisiana is another. The Louisiana program they voted, the first legislation they passed was 2015. They are still yet to dispense any cannabis within the state. And as a matter of fact, the guidance from the state website says they've got about 300 more days left before they are forced to do it. More than likely, if they can't get it up, they'll extend that timeline even further. So when they sell this compromise as this is the fastest way to get access to cannabis in the state, I call BS. That's not true.
If you look at the people who came into that room to forge this so-called compromise, they are all people who we have been fighting for 4 years every step of the way.
Literally.
The Utah Medical Association and their real estate director, CEO, Michelle McComber, has not said one accurate statement about cannabis in anything that I have read in all of the articles, ever, yes, ever. The Utah Medical Association in 2016 got up at a press conference and said that cannabis was about as medicinal as the designer drug bath salts, which at that point was making a lot of people go psychotic and commit suicide around the country, if you recall that.
And they were part of the compromise?
Yes, and the legislature is the same one that has been passing Representative Brad Dawes' message bills, which have not really delivered much of anything to anybody for the last 2 years.
And still not working, and they were part of the compromise.
And Senator Vickers, who was one of the principal drafters of the compromise, wrote SB 130, which has also not been implemented in any way, shape, or form.
And he's a pharmacist.
And he is, oh yeah,
and he was part of the compromise.
You've seen the Drug Safe Utah ads, I assume. And
it wasn't in the part of the compromise. Was the patients' advocacy group, the cannabis group. So we have a bunch of anti-cannabis people writing legislation about cannabis, but they don't have the patients' advocacy group, the cannabis organization, the people that have access to national help that focuses on patients and doctor relationships. They weren't included in the conversation.
And are these the people you trust to replace Proposition 2? That's my question.
Yeah, I can help with that.
Okay, under Prop 2, it's any certified medical practitioner with a Schedule 2 license to prescribe narcotics.
Right.
And under the compromise, only MDs and DOs, and as I pointed out, for certain specific diagnoses, only specific kinds of doctors will be allowed to do it. And those doctors, by the way, we're not even going to trust them. We are going to make sure that everybody who goes through this has to go through a 15-day review at this central state bureaucracy that we're going to build up. And if you love the Division of Drugs and Alcohol Beverage Control, the ABC, you're going to love the compromise.
Greg, from a legal perspective, what would your take on that be?
The legal perspective and the practical perspective. I think the difficulty with the practical perspective of the compromise to the compromise is getting physicians and pharmacists to participate in the way that they envision that happening through a state program. There's quite a bit of limitation. Obviously, I mean, on paper, it has a method of how it's to work. Practically speaking, it is very limiting. So from a legal perspective, whether or not a doctor is going to put themselves in a position to jeopardize their license or by being put out there is a question that I think is not something I can answer, because I don't think it's a legal issue. I think it's more a choice issue. The other limiting factor that I saw was the 20%. So when you're in rural, for the compromise of compromise, if you are a rural medical cannabis user, you're already very limited in your resources for a physician. Now it's limited to only 20% of their practice may they recommend. So I think there's, practically speaking, I think there's quite a bit of limitations with the compromise as I see it.
Getting their care from their nurse practitioners, then when they drive 120 miles to get to an MD, then they're going to have to do something called forming a relationship.
Right, exactly. They'll have to form a new relationship. They'll have to hope that doctor that they travel to doesn't already have 20% of their patients prescribing medical cannabis. And then they'll have to also hope that if they see a doctor that it's in their network, that it's covered by insurance, at least the doctor visit will be. again, that's a gamble. If they're traveling out of network, more than likely they're going to be in some type of out of network situation with insurance. And so it's going to be cost prohibitive. And talking about cost for just a second, with the centralized pharmacy and with this method, it's going to be very, very cost restricted for patients to get access to things that would be much cheaper for them to get on the black market. So if what we're truly trying to do is get a program up that allows people to stop going to a black market provider, the compromise is not the program to choose.
I think the biggest message that I can send to everybody tonight is, first, you've got to vote for Prop 2. That's the only guarantee you have. What you have presented for you was a political theater, is like what I used to like to call it. That press conference was to shake that vote and that confidence in the individuals in the community. We have time to reaffirm that vote. So please make sure you vote. But not only that, you need to call the governor. That's who is calling the special session. He's the only one that can stop it. You can call your legislators and tell them, if we do have a special session, this is how you feel. But you need to stop the special session from happening. The reason why we're upset is because this compromise bill, as you can tell, did not have patients in mind. The whole point of us bringing medical cannabis attention to our state is for who? The bureaucrats? The legislative body who has blocked us? No, we brought it for us. This is a movement for the people, by the people. And that's what we need to be telling our legislative body, our elected officials, and certainly this lame duck governor. Get your hands off of our legislation. We earned this, and we want it. So please, get out the vote. That's my biggest message I could tell you, because you know what? One person can make a difference, and every single one of you should try.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Another big hand for this panel.